There's so many different roles that a worship leader plays at any given time in the life of a community. And those that we lead in worship need us in many ways to step into these roles, not simply being a musician or a song leader. They need someone to blend that worshipful pastoral heart with the gift of music and song. So we kick in and we step up to a number of different kinds of roles. One of the great metaphors that I've heard about the role of the worship leader is that of the best man in a wedding, where we're facilitating an interaction between the bride and the groom. We're welcoming people into a living encounter with God. And then somehow we get to dive in and participate in it ourselves. And I think that's just a significant vision that we can hold on to when we think about our role. My role is not to make googly eyes at the bride. It's not to get the bride liking my latest licks and get this thing going on. What it is to create an almost transparent world in which my gift and uniqueness is present, but it's not primary. And that's what I'm thinking is really the forward motion in us becoming effective worship leaders. Our gift is present. It's moving people. It's shaping something. But it's not primary. It's not the point. It's clear that I'm bridging something, that I'm creating a dynamic, a place for something else to happen. And that's an encounter with the living God. So when we talk about roles, I think there are a number of different kinds of roles that we have to step up to. The first role I'll talk about is the priestly role. And that's just my deep belief that the worship leader is called to build bridges for people to connect with God. We want to call people home to home things, to central things. If you had the image of a fire going, hospitality, tables being set, you were starting to get to this role of the worship leader. When someone comes to the door and they knock and I open the door, my goal or my job is not to startle them, not to shock them or awake them into awareness of who they are and, somehow get their defenses up as I try to penetrate. No, what I want to do musically, what I want to do as a pastoral leader, what I want to do as a person is create a space where they feel like hospitality has been done toward them. The table is set. There are foods that have been thought about related to who they are. Those foods can be songs. They can be the atmosphere we create, the sounds we create, the aesthetics of the room, the time we meet, the warmth. All those kinds of things actually go toward us fulfilling this priestly role. We're bridge builders. We're helping make a connection. And in order to do that, we as worship leaders need to create a space that people feel disarmed in as they enter. People feel like they could open up in this case, like they have words to say what they want to say to God. I, as a worship leader, love creative, more obtuse lyrics. But when I'm leading people in worship, I'm listening to what my wife is saying about worship. I just don't feel like I can really find a meeting place with God in those kinds of songs or these. Now, I don't necessarily change everything, but I change a lot to care for the entire room. Someone, a great friend, once handed me a picture of our community in the midst of a worship time. And there was a truck driver, and there was a computer tech, and there was a homeless person, and there were children playing, and there were single moms, and there were moms of young children, and there were folks from our home for the mentally handicapped. There were all sorts of people in different stages of life, different situations going on in their world. And I looked at that and I said, I need to build a bridge for them. It doesn't matter if I get to do all the latest stuff I want to do. My goal is a priestly goal. I want to bring them home. I want to talk about who God is in the songs. I want to remind us that God is near. God is present. God is faithful. God is sovereign. It's going to be okay. At the end of all things, He will be the Alpha and the Omega. He's going to wrap things up. He is attending to your life in the midst of your suffering or your pain. We have a priestly role. And we need to put that on and get beyond our licks and get beyond, all those other things we might want to do and fulfill that priestly role in a community. Secondly, I believe we have a role as a teacher. We are educators. We are retelling, reimagining the kingdom story for people. When I look over a year at all of my set lists, I want them to resound substantially with true ideas about who God is. true ideas about what a human being is, true ideas about what God has done for us, what he's doing in us, what he is doing through us in the world. Being a teacher has everything to do with effective worship leadership. The songs that we choose, the prayers that we pray, the things we put up in the projection, the images even that are used. Everything we do teaches, it educates, it instructs. Even some will say, in different traditions, how we set up the room. If the worship leader's just always at the front and people are way distant, and there's this sense of, again, that clergy-laity split, we're communicating something. So that doesn't mean we need to change everything, but it does mean we need to be aware that we are fulfilling a role as a teacher. We also fulfill a storyteller role in our communities. We're retelling the realities of the kingdom in music. We are using artful forms like music, like songs, like images. Storytelling is a key role for the worship leader. We need to see ourselves at Christmas time, at Easter, during Lent, Good Friday, Maundy, Thursday. When we look at the whole picture of the church here, we want to help retell the story in such a way that the children get it, that the adults get it, that all those who are gathering to worship get a fresh glimpse of what the miracle of that part of the kingdom story is all about. So in that sense, worship leaders need to fulfill a role as storytellers. Worship leaders also have a role to step up to in the evangelist role. Now, it may not be in the same way that someone whose primary calling is to be an evangelist might fulfill that. But we do need to recognize when we are leading worship, people are coming from all sorts of walks of life. I've seen many worship leaders get up in front of their communities and they talk to everyone like they're in. Like everyone gets it, everyone's a Christian, everyone's been doing this a while, and really they're talking to the people as if everyone is where they are at. And I deeply believe that every worship leader needs to very carefully think about what they say. Could that person in the back, who may never have been in a church before, or at least not this kind, or had this kind of experience, can they access what I'm saying? Are my words connecting with them? Am I creating a sense of a disarming atmosphere? Am I serving them through my words? So we become evangelists. We become inviters to the kingdom story. And I think that's just so vital to us being effective worship leaders. Recognize that not everyone's in the same place in the room. And begin to speak in such a way and communicate that you are inviting everyone to a place of encounter. You're inviting people who may not know the Lord yet into being who they were made to be. That's a certain set of sentences and phrases and thoughts that we need to convey as we stand before people as worship leaders. It's so vital. Then we have a pastoral role to play. And that pastoral role is in nurturing our team. It's actually deeply caring for the people who we are leading in our bands. It's actually deeply caring about the people in the congregation. You see, if I pastorally deeply care about the people in my congregation, I can step up onto that platform or step off of that platform, knowing that if my role is visible or not, I have a part to play in nurturing the body of Christ. And that's where ego, pride, all these other things just need to take a back seat to us being kingdom pastoral people. We are there to be shepherds. A great friend of mine at one point came to me after a worship set, and he said to me, he's a pastor, and he's been very seasoned in his life as a worship leader. As a pastor. He's seen hundreds of worship leaders lead, and he came up to me with this excitement in his eyes, and he said, "Dan, I finally get it. I finally figured out the quality of worship leaders that I love, that deeply move me, that I feel like lead me effectively into worship." And I said, "What is it? What is it? I want to know." He said, "It's their pastoral. I feel like they are there for me, and I'm not there for them." Right? He said, they're pastoral. They lead me somewhere. They are there to guide me, but to join me in the process. It's not all about them and their visible platform and their music. It's about me. It's about us together coming to a place of encounter. And I feel that that they are involved deeply personally. It's beyond the music for them, and I feel like they are leading us to go beyond the music in everything they do. They don't become the center. God becomes the center, and they do whatever it takes to get us there. And I began to think about it. It's not that we don't enjoy ourselves. It's not that we don't get to be unique and do our thing. It's not that it isn't a blast and a buzz to do what we do, but it's not the point. And he was saying our pastoral care, our heart for the people who are in front of us needs to be paramount. A dear friend of mine who mentored me as a worship leader, she was a woman worship leader, and she would have me co-lead with her, and she would just, teach me along the way, an older woman. And she would say to me all the time, she would say, Dan, listen, if you don't love the people you lead, you get out from in front of that microphone. Or from behind the microphone. If you don't love this community, if you don't love the bride, you just need to leave from behind that microphone, because you're representing something, but it's not the heart of God. And I remember her saying that to me one time after she felt like I was particularly being a cheerleader, trying to get the church to do something, so I felt good about my worship leadership. And she said to me, look, you have a week. You go get on your face before God. And you meet with him and you ask him for his heart for this community. And you stay there until you get it. And I remember that moment of feeling like as a worship leader it was a make or break moment. I could either not do that and just step away from the microphone. Or I could choose that pathway and then fulfill that call on me as a worship leader. And I remember going before God, and I'm telling you, he broke my heart for the community. I got in front of our community again. And I looked and I began to see the parents and their children and the incidents, the issues that I knew were going on in different people's lives. I remember standing up then the next week in front of our community plus a whole wider community, and I began to just see the people that had lost their child a few months before. The guy who had just come off of his drug addiction. I looked back and I saw the people who were affluent but incredibly generous with their resources. I saw the people who were caring for the broken in our city. And my heart just expanded. It felt like it was going to explode. I began to weep in the midst of my worship set. And a friend came up to me afterward. They said, that was a beautiful time of worship. But what happened to you there in the middle? I mean, it got really emotional for you. I said, I fell in love with the bride of Christ again. I just realized this is who I am leading. I got to know them. I felt their heart deep within my heart. And I wanted to lead them to a place of encounter. And it wasn't about me. And they said we could feel that, That was that pastoral role coming up in me, being unearthed in me. Get on your face before God and get a heart for your community, those that God has given you to lead. And don't strap on that guitar and everything else again until you've begun to pursue God in this. That is what makes an effective worship leader. I deeply believe it. That pastoral role. Then we have a prophetic role. And that prophetic role, if calling people in a priestly way back to home, back to central things, is part of our role as a worship leader, we also have a prophetic role to help people to get to a new edge, to see a new vista, to go somewhere they haven't gone before. But we always do that with grace, pastorally caring for them along the way. We always do it with good communication. I like to say to people who are really into their prophetic calling, to mess with people and push borders, I just like to say to them, the fruits of the Spirit are not personality traits. They're evidence that the Spirit of God is working in you. And the fruits of the Spirit are love, and their joy, and their peace, and their patience, and their kindness. I mean, these aren't personality traits. These are fruits of the Spirit. Kindness and gentleness and goodness and faithfulness and self-control. Who are you to shock and awe the people of God all the time? You need to have some credibility with these people. And that comes through pastorally caring, through that priestly role. But the prophetic role should never be set aside. I was in New Zealand a number of years ago, and a dear friend took us to the edge of the highest cliff in the country. And I remember standing near that edge and thinking, there is no way I am going to that edge. But I've got to get a picture of that. It must be so cool. It's apparently a beautiful view. And I want to show it to my wife, to my kids, to my community, to everyone I know. I want them to see this beautiful view. But I'm afraid to go there. And a dear friend of mine, he came up to me and he whispered in my ear, he said, "You're afraid, aren't you, Dan?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm afraid." He said, "You dummy, get down on your face and crawl to the edge." And I thought, ding, hey, I could do that. I got down on my face and I crawled with my camera on the grass, getting all kind of dirty, and I leaned over the edge and I took the pictures and I brought them back to share with my community. But, he even said to me, he said, "I'll hold your legs if you want me to." We have to go to the edge. God lives on the edge, not just in the quiet, comfortable home. He also lives on the edge. We need to be in the midst of the culture, in the midst of the world, connecting, moving, not just being relevant, but deeply connecting with our culture. We need to call the church to the edge, but we always must be tethered to community, tethered to the foundational truths of the faith, not talking and singing about stuff that's all out there, acting like it's central to the gospel when I'm just being strong about this, when it's not. We can sing about angels and demons and all sorts of things all we want. It's not central to the gospel. And I believe we need to sing and speak about the main and the plain, and yet God will give us fresh views. He'll give us fresh visions of what this whole new creation work is that he is about in the world. But we do it tethered to community, connected, always offering what we do with encouragement, building the body of Christ, shaping it, leading it on, and doing so from a place of credibility and relationship, which sometimes takes us time to purchase in a community. And I deeply believe that there are many people who are very gifted in this whole arena of hearing the voice of God and speaking it to a community, but the way they go about it, in my estimation, is faulty when it comes to the character of Christ being evident in everything they do and the way they present it. So we want to be prophetic. Sometimes we do need to sing that spontaneous thing, but we also need to always couple passion with restraint. Passion leads us to those places. We lead it. We go there. We try that new thing. Restraint says, am I losing the people here? Am I just being indulgent now, the band and I doing our little thing and hoping everyone can come along? My wife is great for this. She'll say, "I know you got into this very cool, little vamp musically, and you were singing scriptures and all this. It was very cool, and I thought it was really rich for a bit for all of us. But then it just kind of went on, and it just felt like I was disconnecting, and people were." And I said, I think I felt that. I think I felt like I just went a little beyond it. And, sometimes that's okay, and sometimes that's the gift. But we need to be able to hear from those that we care about and those who have authority, even in the community, those who will see things that we won't see. So we do want to call people to the edge, but doing so tethered to community, tethered to the essential truths of the faith, tethered to one another, tethered with our team. I often say that, you can be as prophetic and spontaneous as you want in a worship set, but you better have practiced with your band how you will be spontaneous if you get there. I practice that 4-chord vamp with them and say, if I go spontaneous, it'll probably be here, and these are the 4 chords we will play together. And they go, "Oh, okay, we'll go with you anywhere." And so I'm in the middle of a conference, and a chorus feels like it needs to take off again, and it does. And then, they look at me, and I start to go into this thing, and they know, lock into those chords. Yep, there's where Dan is, So it's so important we take on that prophetic role. We also have an administrative role as a worship leader. We plan teams, we plan sets, we plan words for people doing Media Shout or PowerPoint or whatever else is going on there. We're planning in terms of hearing what the pastor's all about for that weekend, what the teaching's going to be about, what the dynamics are in our community. Is our community in a time of celebration or grief or mourning? We take on that role and then we break it down into administrative details. Worship leaders need to be good planners, planning ahead, having song sheets, having words for the tech people. They need to plan ahead as best as they can. Personalities are different. We all have to grow through one another, but we need to be planning worship schedules so the team knows when they're on, the sound people, whoever else you have responsibility for. We need to get good at it. Now, there are a lot of really great online planners. I am partial to worshipteam.com for everything that I do, but there are a lot of ways to get good at planning what you do. And I would just encourage you, find those things, lock into them, and get good patterns and learn the administrative role of a worship leader. you will notice that people like worship leading with you better. They like working with you better, the more they feel like you've been pastorally caring for them by having the expectations clear, the schedules made, all those other dynamics. Now, let me just set you free. I'm a very random, spontaneous person, and yet I can plan when I need to. So I really encourage you to recognize your personality type and find tools that work for you. I found things for me that through the years work for me administratively, and it's why I can step into a situation and plan it. I'm not at my optimum in doing it. I'm better at just doing the thing, leading it, teaching. But the fact is, I've had to learn to be administrative, and you can learn it too. It's an important role for the worship leader. Finally, an intercessory role. A worship leader carries a heart for the community and a heart for what God is doing in the community. That is not just for the pastor, it's not just for the small group leader, it's not just for the children's pastor, it's the calling of a worship leader in a community to be praying regularly for their community, for the other leaders they work with, for their teams, for those they partner with in creating worship spaces in their church. We have an intercessory calling on us. And I know many worship leaders who perceive that and have owned it, and it's opened up their heart to the community and the community's heart to them, and they've gained substantial credibility. Why? Not because of what's going on the stage, because of what's going on in the car, behind the closed door in their bedroom, or their prayer closet, wherever they meet with God. They are asking God to put his favor on that community, on those leaders, and lead us, God, into all that you have for us as a community. Now, I deeply believe that changes the sound of the songs. It changes the way our voice sounds. It changes the way we play. It changes our interactions. It changes it because we're beginning to get the heart of God. So we can step into all these different roles, even if we're not completely in our element in each one. We can get supports and help from the community around us, people who are better at those things than we are. And we can enlist them. But if we don't have this intercessory heart, there won't be a softness to it, a yieldness to God in it, that people do actually perceive, whether it's spoken or not, when they see a worship leader lead. Now, I just want to sort of capture all of that together in this musical role that worship leaders fulfill. And I do believe there are visual worship leaders. There are people who lead worship in many different ways, but I'll speak to the musical worship leader. We need to get good at all these and encapsulate it all in our musical role. Our musical role is really an expression of, in my estimation, an overflow of all these other elements. But in our musical role, we want to tighten our musicality, be well rehearsed, be growing in our instrument, be growing in our leadership. Not always the best musician among us, but certainly the one called to lead worship and getting better at what we do so that we can more effectively create that musical space that in priestly ways, in prophetic ways, in all these different ways, invites people to a living encounter with God. So these are just some of the essential roles that a worship leader must attend to. And I ask God every day, Lord, help me grow in each one of these roles, that like a beautiful garden, there is flourishing in many different corners and supports coming in places that need greater input and nutrients along the way.